Thank you very much. Dear friends, my name is Astrid Thors and I'm the chair of Liberal International's Human Rights Committee. I always want to point out that Liberal International political organization with such a human rights committee. And certainly, unfortunately, there are a lot of things and situations that needs the attention of such a body. And as one of our priorities, we have the monitoring of the shrinking democratic space, which is a fact. Now, latest report on that is by the international idea how really the state of democracy has not many positive signs. But in Liberal International, we have followed many situations and we continue to follow. And we also see the need to raise questions that might be forgotten by the media at the time. So that's why we have started this series of webinars and also have started articles on our websites. Don't forget the situation. We know that 1 year ago, all attention was on situation in Minsk. But now, still where we have, according to the information I have seen, nearly 900 political prisoners, violence, torture going on. There is not that much attention to the situation, human rights situation in Belarus. Yes, to a certain extent to the refugees. So that is why we wanted to have this panel with all the distinguished guests. And may I also say that we got an additional incentive to have that when some of us watched the BBC interview with Lukashenko on the last of a week ago on 30th of November. It is really worthwhile looking at. The situation has not improved for the prisoners, and we should not forget the human rights defenders, while we are very concerned by the geopolitical situation, all the tensions that we have to the west of the Russian Federation at the moment. Therefore, as said, it is my pleasure and my honor to introduce our distinguished speakers and the distinguished panel. I will first give the floor to Anaïs Marin, who is the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Belarus, and she's also a well-known researcher on the country, working for instance, at the University of Warsaw. You have been monitoring elections in the country, written several books, working with the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum, and you know so much about the country. The latest document on the UN that I have found is the General Assembly resolution from July this year, where your mandate also was extended with one year. And there are many requests to the Belarus authorities. So please, Anaïs, what is your view on the human rights situation in Belarus at the moment?
Kiitos paljon, Mrs. Chairperson. I happen to have lived in Finland several years, and I'm very honored that you are chairing this session. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first let me thank the organizers for setting up this event and giving me the opportunity to participate. My introductory remarks will focus on the ongoing degradation of the human rights situation in Belarus. The country has been known for the past 2 decades for systemic drawbacks in the human rights field. Yet, as you know, violations over the past 18 months have become systematic. They have targeted people from all walks of life, in all regions, all age groups. The authorities have used arbitrary violence for harassing and prosecuting not only protesters who were exerting their internationally recognized right to freedom of expression and freedom of peaceful assembly. But most importantly, in my view, violations continue to this day due to the general climate of lawlessness and impunity in the country. I'll mention here 3 issues which are of greatest concern for my mandate as UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Belarus. Firstly, the government of Belarus has remained deaf to all calls from various international human rights mechanisms at the UN and beyond to refrain from disproportionate violence, set those arbitrarily detained for expressing their civic and political views free, and engage in a dialogue with civil society and the opposition with a view at finding a peaceful way out of the current legitimacy crisis that the acting president has been facing since his contested re-election on 9th of August 2020. This implies that the situation is now in an impasse, and I must say that we don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. The government of Belarus continues its policy of non-recognition and non-cooperation with my mandate. Neither has it granted access to other mandate holders of the so-called special procedures, which is a mechanism established by the UN Human Rights Council to monitor, report, and offer recommendations for helping governments comply with their international human rights obligations. This said, in my capacity, I must continue trying to engage with the authorities and uphold the highest standards of independence, impartiality, neutrality, and objectivity in my assessment of the situation on the ground, else I may fall victim to accusations as well. The mandate has been perceived as politicized since its very creation in 2012 at the initiative of the European Union. Secondly, and since I have been closely monitoring the situation, albeit from a distance, I may objectively say that things have been going from bad to worse. Human rights defenders recognize, as you mentioned, over 900 prisoners who are arbitrarily detained on political grounds. This, however, does not take into account the thousands more people who have in one way or another been subjected to human rights violations for over 18 months now. And I'm confident that Olga will tell us more about this because her organization is indeed having a broader interpretation of what repression means. What we notice is that apart from the judicial and administrative harassment, the intimidations, the threats, a growing number of Belarusians are suffering from repression, which for the past year has targeted not only peaceful protesters and civico-political activists, but all those who are trying to uphold fundamental freedoms and the right to a fair trial in Belarus. Hundreds have been attacked simply for doing their job. I'm thinking here mostly about medical workers, journalists, human rights defenders, lawyers who have lost their license in mock disciplinary procedures, and leaving behind clients who are without any kind of defense in court. All these people increasingly face disciplinary measures meant to intimidate them, deter them, or push them to exile. In fact, the legislation, which is already extremely restrictive, has been instrumentalized to prosecute all dissenting views. I have in mind here notably the amended law on the fight against extremism, which is being weaponized to prosecute and hold criminally liable all the organizations and individuals who dare to criticize the government. The authorities have tightened the screws with the amended law, the amended code of administrative offenses, the law on financing of terrorism, and laws on mass media and mass events to crack down on dissent and retaliate against those whom we at the UN consider as victims of human rights violations. Moreover, legislation is now applied retroactively in an attempt at criminalizing otherwise benign offenses and deterring further protest online or offline. These laws unjustifiably restrict the field for public debate and participation, and their selective implementation seems geared mainly towards punishing dissent. As a result, for example, 300 civil society organizations have been liquidated over the past 6 months, which amounts to an outright attempt at purging civil society, and I chose that term on purpose. As a consequence, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people were compelled to flee into exile for fear of repression and imprisonment. This, according to some, could amount to a crime of deportation. We have seen it in the case of the Rohingya Muslim minority who fled from Myanmar to Bangladesh. Thirdly, what worries me most is the general climate of lawlessness and impunity that prevails. Due to shortcomings with the administration of justice, which in Belarus does not protect the rights of people to a fair trial and presumption of innocence, thousands of victims of human rights violations are left with no recourse whatsoever. Over 4,000 complaints were lodged in 2020 alone for violence, ill treatment, and torture. None of these complaints has resulted in the opening of judicial proceedings in Belarus. Hence, and that would be my conclusion for now, the most important in my view is to spare no effort towards holding the perpetrators of the most serious violations, and we are talking about potential crimes against humanity, to account, pursuant of the principle of universal jurisdiction for such serious crimes, torture, for example. My mandate, alongside other independent experts, is working closely with the OHCHR examination of Belarus, which is a accountability mechanism established by the Human Rights Council last March under the auspices of the High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet. We have already compiled and analyzed evidence, which will be made available to any prosecutor willing to adjudicate the massive violations allegedly perpetrated in Belarus for the past 2 years. I will stop here and look forward to questions where I can eventually get into more details about this mechanism if you're interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much for the concise report, and actually looking also at ways ahead. And as you said, Olga Karach also has a lot of information. Olga and I, we are old friends. We have done webinars earlier on. You have been working as a human rights activist and journalist. You are now working in Lithuania, where you also have your degree from the Vilnius University, the European Humanities University, and you are director of the civil rights organization Nash Dom, Our House, who is trying to keep, as I understand, track of what is happening. And I know that you have paid attention lately to exactly the situation of prisoners, of maltreatment, discrimination also of disabled people with HIV and so on. So Olga, what is your information taken into account what Anaïs also said, and what do you hear and what can we do? Olga, please.
Yeah, and dear Astrid and dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the possibility to speak about a very complicated political situation in Belarus. Today, Alexander Lukashenko is recreating BSSR, Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic 2.0 of the times of Stalin, with all the characteristics. First of all, he is building Belarusian Gulag system, and it is not a metaphor. In prisons and medical labor centers, the slave labor of children, women, political prisoners is used. In collective farms, kolkhozes, free labor of school children and students. I want to remind that for their work, Belarusian slaves are paid from €1 to €1 per month of hard labor. For example, Viktor Babarika, one of the most popular presidential candidates at 2020, and he's a banker, today is paid €1.70 per month, which is equivalent to 59 euro cents per month. The terror, which is random and aiming at breaking down the resistance and intimidating, including the know-how of the 21st century gender-based repressions. Punitive psychiatry, when women human rights defenders are put in psychiatry wards and tortured, kidnapped and removed children from women activist families. Belarusian women get imprisoned altogether for more than 15,000 days and pay more than 700,000 euro in fines only in administrative charges. A person may get arrested for everything, for white and red bras handed in the balconies, for a candle in the window, for white and red clothes, even for a bed sheet where is written, "It's not a flag." There are more than 5,000 politically motivated criminal cases in Belarus now. More than 50,000 Belarusians have suffered from torture. The number of killed and raped in prisons is still unknown. Alexander Lukashenko is even using COVID-19 to fight his opponent. We know about deaths of at least 2 protesters from the COVID in prison. They got infected when people sick with the COVID-19 were deliberately put in their cells so that they would infect as many political prisoners as possible. And of course, there was no medical help provided. There is default of law and random trial conveyors is working. But Anaïs spoke a lot about it. The state-planned economy of Belarus not aimed at gaining profit, but executing state-given plans, and it doesn't matter what happens next. For example, in Belarus, even cows are sent to pastoral lands in spring in accordance with a special order of Lukashenko, which leads to death of the animals because of the different temperature regime in different regions of my country. When there is high frost in west, there is still snow in Vitebsk. Accordingly, there is a huge rise in corruption and rent-seeking behavior. All the medium and big businesses are under the control of state officials and enforcers, who are also getting under the table payment for their control. The economical situation is extremely bad. And especially it's connected to single mothers. I would like to say that 72% of people officially under poverty line are single mothers with children. It's obvious that in such situation, Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic 2.0 can only exist as a part of bigger empire, the Soviet Union. That's why we can say that Lukashenko and Vladimir Putin have found each other and they're restoring the empire together. The increasing role of all enforcers, first of all, of course, of the KGB. At the present moment, KGB employers are controlling the whole machinery of the state, including local administrations. They already say that Belarusian economy is homonymy from the Belarusian name of the riot police, OMON. I would like to say about possible annexation of Belarus by the Kremlin, and it's currently going on. I want to remind that on November the 1st, Lukashenko and Putin signed 28 roadmaps and an integration act. The context of the 28 maps is still unknown, what means that we won't like it. My opinion is clear. Also, a Union state military doctrine has been signed. It's clear that on the 10th of November, Putin took control of the whole enforcement agencies of Belarus, including the area. In February 2022, a constitutional referendum in Belarus is planned, which is pushed by Vladimir Putin, following by the elections, enacting the Euro annexion of our country, which is already happens de facto. I would like to say that the political situation is extremely difficult. By blackmailing, using human trafficking and migration crisis, attacking the neighbors, Alexander Lukashenko is trying to force the European Union to accept concession and start the dialogue and negotiation with him without any freedom for political prisoners and by his conditions. The previous month, Lukashenko attacked Poland, and now he turned to Ukraine, threatens the country or with war or with provocations, nobody knows. I hope that we will discuss what we can do together, but I would like to have much more your attention that soon, that now it's very important to speak not only about Lukashenko, but the activities of Vladimir Putin and Lukashenko together. Thank you very much for your attention. I am very open to listen to your questions.
Thank you, Olga, for your last words, because I think this is also why we want to have our dear friend Grigory Yavlinsky today giving his view on what is happening and how near is the annexation and where are the two countries going. I think in many ways, Grigory, Daragi Grigory, you don't need any introduction when we are talking in the liberal international family, because already 2004, you are the awardee of our most prestigious award, the Freedom Award. And since then, I have learned to know how knowledgeable your analysis are of the country and the region, and how you continue to wear and bear the liberal flag in the most difficult circumstances. So, dear Grigory, please, you have the floor, and I think it's a very natural following from Olga's intervention, talking about what is happening as to the annexation and other effects going on in the region. Please, Grigory.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased for your invitation, and I think that the situation in our region, by the way, in the world as well, but especially in our region surrounding Russia, I mean, on the Ukrainian direction and also Belarusian direction, is extremely important and dangerous. First of all, if to continue what Olga said, I have to say that there is no doubt that if Vladimir Putin would have such an opportunity, then Russia would make an annexation of Belarus immediately, as soon as it will be possible. So it's simply a question of time, maybe a question of possibility. There is the policy of Kremlin to do the same with Ukraine and with Belarus. No question about that. This is absolutely clear. By the way, I want to stress and underline that it was clear at the end of 90s even, not only now. The problem, and I want to share with you, like with the friends, the problem is that international community and international political analysts don't see such a clear messages which were coming from Russia to the different directions all this time, that it needs to have such a special events in Minsk and such a terrible developments in Minsk and in Ukraine and in Crimea, then to start talking about that. So, but we maybe are going to touch this when we are going to speak about what happened in Russia itself. But if to understand and to have a absolutely clear vision, I want to say very clearly that Russia at the moment has a very rigid authoritarian regime. What means rigid authoritarian regime in Russia today? This is first, complete lack of freedom of speech, incredibly powerful pressure on the peace protest, non-fair elections, no division of power, no independence of justice. So we have a police state. Yes, which have a trend to develop itself even to more totalitarian state than we have today. So it's a real challenge for Europe. It's a real challenge for international community, and for us, people who are working in Russia. It's a really serious developments, which can be tragic for many people. I want also to say, I prepared myself to say it later, but what I want to say, the most important about Belarus, two things. First, I think that all power and all strength must be concentrated on release of political prisoners in Belarus. This is task number one. Forget about all the other things. 800 or 900 political prisoners in the country of such size like Belarus, it's unbelievable. And it's absolutely unacceptable. So day by day, it must be real pressure of the whole international community on this issue. What about constitution and other things? It's also important, but it's number 2, 3, 4, 5. The first thing, even just, it must be as an absolute 100% conditions of whatever in Belarusian case, because the people are simply dying there with no reason. There is no explanation why 900 people must be in prison. They have children, they have families. There is dozens of journalists which are in prisons. The whole newspapers, the whole internet, the whole of them, 30 or 40 people are just there. The people who are just using internet are also in prison. So it's not just simply for discussion. There is no issue for discussion. This is simply something which needs to be done immediately. In the same time, I want to, Astrid and the all other friends, I want to say, this year, Bloomberg reported that exports from Belarus to European Union increased 58%. I'm sorry, I have no words to say. Everybody should know that this year, IMF suddenly sent it to Belarus about $1 billion to support the country, to support Mr. Lukashenko. What we are talking about if that is the case? If European Union, which have all information about that, it's a big difference with the Stalin time. Nobody knows at that time what's going on. Now everybody knows every day, every minute what's going on in Belarus. Nevertheless, it happens. So this is a big question. Then what would be the consequences of that kind of policies? What our talks and discussions about? If this year, after 2020, when we have already 900 political prisoners, we have increasing exports for 58%. This is what Bloomberg is saying. The statistics of Belarus is saying more than 100%. I don't believe it, but 58% I do, because it's more or less reliable information from Bloomberg. So two things, stop that if you want to have changes. First, secondly, release, or even just vice versa, do everything to release the political prisoners. You should say them. I'm sorry to teach anybody. I'm not prepared to make lessons, but I want to say it's absolutely necessary to say no experts at all. While 9,000 people are sitting, placing in the prisons with no reason for that. That would be my policy. And I would say, I don't care about just profits. If to compare these profits with the profits of European Union, it's nothing. But for Belarus, it's just enormous volume. United Nations have to interfere. Everybody, European Union, United Nations, I don't know who else. So I want to continue, and I have some other ideas, but if to start with the most important things, of course, that. Another question that of course, I'm going to answer all other questions about Russia as well.
Yeah. I will. I think. Thank you for your forceful statement, all the three of you. I think it's crystal clear that the situation you are painting, you have the same impression. And now I want to divert from the script and say, Olga, what do you say about about the newest package of sanctions was adopted very late. I think it was last week by the foreign ministers. Is it what you were asking for? Is it going to be efficient? And if I combine what you and Grigory said about the export, about the slave work that is now really happening in Belarus, what do you say about efficient actions and the fifth sanction package? We know that there is something else possibly in the pipeline after the discussion between Putin and Biden yesterday on the Russian front. Maybe we can come back to that, but first to you, Olga, fifth sanction package, was it efficient? Will it change anything? And from where comes the increase in the export, as Grigory is telling? And as an economist, he knows what resources are reliable.
First of all, I'm totally agree with Grigory Yavlinsky. I would like to remind that we have 8 children, political prisoners now, and I'm very disappointed about the economical package because I have one very strange question to European Union. I already mentioned and spoke about the prison factories where political prisoners, women and children, are used as slaves and receive €1 sometimes €1 per month, and still it's no any such company, prison state company, in the sanction list. The business of the police is very huge. The police receive something about $1 million per year from the prison companies, and $75 million from the medical labor centers, where they use labor slaves too, and they receive the money directly. So we can block the whole economical system until they receive the money. And this is very important. The whole production from the prison factories and medical labor centers are going to West, to 21 countries. They receive the money from West, and somebody in the West is buying the production made by hands of our political prisoners, children and women in prison. And by my opinion, it's very important to include such kind of prison factories of Lukashenko to such kind of sanction list, because I'm very surprised, but still it's not done.
Do you know, if I come in here, did these factories figure on any proposal to the foreign minister? Was your president, Tikhanovskaya, was she able to contact people? Was it proposed, or and if you can also put on our let's say site, give us the information with the concrete names, because we cannot be without action. And may I say that one of the ways Liberal International is working, that we normally contact politicians in the countries where our member parties are represented and try to engage them in the common work for human rights. So please provide us with this proposal that might have been forwarded to some decision makers earlier.
Thank you very much. And this is real political support and solidarity. We will do it. We will prepare and send the list of the prison companies. I'm very surprised, but our police, they're proud of such kind of work, and they're very open to distribute the information about the prison companies, etc. So we will provide and we will ask the help, because by my opinion, it should be done immediately. Thank you very much.
And can I ask Anaïs, when we hear now the information of these slave factories, does your mandate include reporting on this? Is it possible, or are there other Human Rights Council appointed special rapporteurs who could be helpful in documenting the situation? how are the mandates divided? And could you also tell us, I mean, how can we continue collecting the information necessary for a possible prosecution? And do you know if there is, we know that, let's say, lawyers in the Netherlands, lawyers in Spain, they are some of the most innovative when prosecuting international crimes. Anaïs, ole hyvä.
Kiitos paljon. So indeed, the special procedures includes not only country mandates, such as my own. Belarus, by the way, is the only European country which has the honor of having a special rapporteur. There are also dozens of so-called thematic mandate holders. It's either working groups or special rapporteurs, and there is actually one on slavery. Because indeed we have been flagging for a number of years, my predecessor Miklos Harashti and myself, the situation with forced labor, not only in detention, as Olga reminded, the amount paid and the conditions of work indeed amount to slavery, which is banned by international human rights law. And I wish to highlight that the special procedures is only one mechanism to try and uphold human rights that we have at the UN. States tend to prefer the so-called UPR, the Universal Periodic Review, because it's among peers, and then they get, comments from other potential perpetrators of human rights violations, encouraging them to make more effort towards meeting their obligations. And in the last review of Belarus, which was last year, the government surprised us by issuing a report, its national report, in which it says that it has sent standing invitations to 9 mandate holders. This was news for us because the government does not cooperate has never sent a standing invitation, for example, to the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And among those 9 mandate holders are the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls. And as we know, women have paid a very high price for upholding human rights in the past year. And the Special Rapporteur on Slavery as well. So I look forward to seeing the government hold up to its commitments and indeed issue an invitation or positively answering to the request for a state visit by the Special Rapporteur on Slavery, because the situation in detention centers is one thing, but forced labor has been reported also in places where children are deprived of liberty. And this is extremely serious, of course, because we're talking about children who have specific needs. And also there is this long tradition, which is familiar for all those who were born in the Soviet Union, of the subotniki, which is also considered as forced labor and is used extensively in Belarus with several purposes. So people are invited, encouraged to work freely on Saturdays for cleaning or painting, whatever, public space. This is forced labor, which has a double purpose. It makes savings for the government because they don't pay, but also it has this function of holding the society together with fear, with the incitations, but also in this climate, because if you refuse, basically you may lose your job if you refuse to participate. Regarding the questions about accountability, the mechanism which I mentioned is aiming towards gathering evidence of serious human rights violations. They are multifaceted. Basically, nowadays we can say that the authorities of Belarus violate almost any possible single international convention, social and economic rights, cultural rights, civic and political rights, but not only. And the High Commissioner has a mandate that was given to her by the Human Rights Council in March to investigate these allegations of serious abuses with a view at transferring this data to prosecutors. nowadays, of course, there is no hope that these crimes could be adjudicated in Belarus proper. We would have to wait for a change, a serious change and serious reforms, which are not to be foreseen unfortunately in the coming years. In the meantime, the countries, notably the neighboring countries in which people who have been subjected to human rights abuses, where they have found a refuge, where they are in exile, they can submit, they can address courts, criminal courts, for prosecutors there to adjudicate their cases, because there is this, according to the principle of universal jurisdiction, for the most serious crimes, and I'm talking here about enforced disappearances, murders, torture, rapes, for example, there is moral obligation. It's pursuant of this jus cogens, the rules erga omnes, etc. They have a moral obligation to prosecute these crimes. For as long as the perpetrators are safely in Belarus, protected by the authorities, they will not go to jail. They will not be held accountable, but at least for the victims, it will be some kind of balsam on their heart to help them overcome the deep psychological wounds following the sufferings that they endured. And I'm not talking only about physical violence, but also the very fact of being pushed into exile is extremely traumatic for thousands and thousands of people. And lastly, there is I want to flag that a consortium of NGOs has submitted a communication to the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court in May, alleging of crimes of deportation due to repression. So they basically used the precedent of the Rohingya, for which the International Criminal Court has proclaimed itself competent, even if Myanmar doesn't recognize the courts, the competence of the court, as does Belarus, hasn't signed the Rome Status. Pursuant of Article 15.2 of the Rome Status, all those countries in which the part of the crime has been committed because the victim is on their territory, these countries are have the possibility to refer these cases to the International Criminal Court. And this is what a lot of people are working on now, and contributing to this effort as well.
Thank you. And we know that even though the procedures seem lengthy, but we have seen cases in Sudan where, for instance, it leads to a change in the long run, and also it is restricting the movement of those persons. But then now I need to come back to Grigory, because you mentioned the increase of export. Olga was calling for more tougher sanctions and really mentioned the state companies. But would that increase even more, let's say, the Russian influence in Minsk, or is it already to see it as a risk, and the annexation is happening as such? That was one question I would like to put you. And Grigory, one other is, of course, which was so directly going to my heart, where you said that Russia, Kremlin is looking upon Ukraine and Belarus in the same way. And there has been, we know how also Kremlin, Putin does not recognize Ukraine as a separate state entity. So is that the same way they are looking upon? So Belarus is not a separate state entity. But how can we, what are the things we need to take into account, further actions from the EU, from the international community with all? And may I ask you, did the three of you, did you watch the BBC interview with Lukashenko on the 30th of November? So many questions, Grigory, but we are waiting with eagerness for your answers.
First of all, I would start with the end. And from my point of view, I just watching Lukashenko already for 25 years. So I don't see anything new in this interview. For me, it was clear 25 years ago. My faction in state parliament of Russia was leaving the state parliament as a protest against Lukashenko's speech in 1999. And we said that if you are giving him a floor, if you are giving him a possibility to make a speech, then you'll have something like that in Russia. So for us, it was clear from all that time, from the very beginning, when he made in the turnover in Belarus, he made a real turnover. So this is a lesson for everybody that if to be serious, it was necessary to start watching all this story 25 years or even more. It was clear where it is moving, or where it is heading. So this is the first thing what I want to say. I also want to thank Anaïs for her article in Chatham House, and what I want to underline when she's saying that crisis reveals wider security threat. That's it, and this is not a question only with the how to stop the migrants. This is not the answer. I agree as well. It's more necessary to read it more carefully. I was looking on it just now, but I want to recommend to all our audience to look at a little bit more seriously, and then a lot of things would be more clear. I want to be very clear, answering Astrid the question. The fate of Belarus depends on Russia. I'm sorry to say that, but this is a reality, as well as Ukraine. My message here is that even if Russia is not made an annexation of these countries, Russia may endlessly make problems for them, endlessly. This is very serious. So it's a problem which must be addressed not only in Minsk and Kyiv, it's a problem which must be addressed to Putin himself, personally and seriously. In all these talks that we are just not doing anything, and this is simply not true at all. At all, in principle. This is that kind of politics. Moscow is a dominating power in the post-Soviet area, and that is necessary to take to the account. I think that understanding of that is gradually coming. Departure from the rigid authoritarian regime in Russia. This is the path to a free Belarus. In the conditions of Lukashenko and Putin, this is completely impossible. So Russia wants to swallow Belarus. This is what Russia wants to do, and it's necessary to understand. So that kind of conversation, it is not clear what is the outcome of that conversation, which was yesterday between President Biden and Putin. But that must be one more question, not only about Ukraine, but about Belarus at the same time, because it's in the same way. All the story is in the same way. It's different only on the surface. Yeah. So once again, the role of Russia on this territory is, of course, very serious. And the question is that the international community must understand what is happening. This is point number one. That's why I said about Anaïs' article. But not only that, it also have to start saying truth. It's not easy. It's not easy, as far as I understand. But without that, nothing would happen. Nothing will happen. All this realpolitik in that situation will bring to blood and victims. This is not the time, as President of US said, chewing gums and making talks in the same time. This is not the right thing in this case. This is too serious. Yeah. So my proposal is, first, the international community have to understand the reality. It's much more difficult than simply making conferences. Secondly, it must learn itself to say truth directly and very clearly. At least such communities like Liberal International, having influential representation in European Parliament, or having such a powerful representation as in Canada. This is necessary to look the ways how to make the voice stronger. I mean, the government of Canada is very close to liberals, as far as I understand. So this is all difficult, but it is absolutely necessary to do all that things. Yeah. And one more point, I want to say that the last steps in Russia to destroy the memorial, it's a real sign of what? It's a real sign of neo-Stalinism in Russia. I want to underline that. This is very important to feel. This is a post-modern Stalinism. It's not the same Stalinism as it was from the point of view how it looks like. It looks like differently, but the substance is the same. What is the substance? The substance is what Lukashenko is doing, what he is doing, what Putin is doing, what Lukashenko is doing. They're making the country of fear. They have the policies to make everybody afraid, to have fear in their soul, the people, because when the people are afraid and they have a fear about everything, about life, about business, about working places, about children, about parents, about everything, all life, they're completely paralyzed. They can't do anything. If you compare the dozens of thousands of people marching in August 2020 in Minsk and the streets in Minsk today, you'll understand this tragedy. It's a real tragedy because the country is full of fear. So we have a real problem because this is not only Minsk, this is not Lukashenko, this is Moscow. In Ukrainian case and in Belarusian one. So it's very difficult to explain this issue because there are formalities, the people are chatting, they're saying we just not, this is a different country, and this is only, you should smile at that. This is talks about nothing. So it's necessary to be tough enough and to take measures. What kind of measures? This is a special debate, and I think that the West is smart enough to create some ideas. I'm not in a position to give an advice. You have so many people and so many bodies and so many institutions and intellectual centers and think tanks. Why should I teach you? My task is to say truth about my country. That's what I'm trying to do on the extent I understand it myself. Then I don't know many who understand it better than you. I now would take some of the questions we have got here in the chat, and there are two questions, of course, many questions of high interest, and one question I might put it to Olga. Is the role of Telegram and other social media helping
or have they already been shut down in Belarus? And I think you answer to the extent possible not to reveal any good methods that you need to use. And of course, we have also the usual question of, if we put harder sanctions on companies, will not the poorest people in Belarus still suffer even more? I think we put this question also to Olga at the moment. So please, Olga.
Yes, the role of social media, not only Telegram, but also YouTube channels and Facebook, etc. This is unbelievable. And this is the reason why the enforcers, especially KGB, attack people who is watching or following social media. And we have more than 400 criminal cases only for comments under any video, and as you know, we have 327 or even more, I don't know, Telegram channels mentioned as extremist, many YouTube channels as and speaking persons like me who is mentioned as terrorists, etc., etc. This is really very serious attacks from the state side, but by my opinion, people need alternative opinion, and people are looking for any alternative opinion. If we speak about sanctions and about everything what we can do for Belarus, yes, we need political support and solidarity. It's true. I would like to be very clear with my political message. We would like to be a part of European civilization. We would like to be with Europe. We don't want to be a part of Russian world. Please help us to run away from Russian world, from Vladimir Putin. I understand that this is very, very complicated. We have several voices in Belarus that now Belarusian protest is not geopolitical. It's not true. Now, the position, by my opinion, is quite dangerous because after when Lukashenko will go out, to make the geopolitical choice will be too late, because Russian propaganda in Belarus is very effective. And I would like to remind that Russian propaganda is working now. Also, I would like to support the position of Grigory. I consider that the idea, let's not make Putin angry, it's very dangerous too, because Vladimir Putin is annexing Belarus not because we made him angry, but because he wants to annex Belarus. It was the same situation with Crimea. It is the same situation with Ukraine. And if we speak about sanctions, by my opinion, also what we expect, something traditionally, what we expect from Europe, especially from our neighborhood. Now, when Vladimir Putin is speaking with Belarusian nation, he has very clear picture of future Belarus. Let's renovate SSSR, Soviet Union, we are brotherhood, we are brothers nations, let's build the new Soviet Union without Lukashenko, etc., etc. And the picture is very clear. If we would like to speak, and we speak with Belarusian nation and say, okay, Belarus is part of Europe, what does it mean, And so for Belarus, we need to create the positive picture of future Belarus with Europe. How we can provide economical reforms, how we can provide social reforms or reforms of state services, and this is very important to answer for people, for Belarusians, how does Belarus look after Lukashenko, but together with Europe. You can help us to create such kind of picture, and we can use your experience of Sweden, experience of Baltic countries or Poland, and this is very important to show the future of Belarus. Now, unfortunately, we haven't, and still we're in process to create such kind of picture. And of course, it's true, economical sanctions is effective, have some kind of effect for Belarusian people too. But if we think about the victims, how many people were imprisoned or imprisoned now. We have Grigory is, yeah, you're right. We have about 900 official political prisoners, but in reality, how many, nobody knows. And so we have several opinions how to recognize the political prisoners. So this is very, very complicated question. How many people are imprisoned by politically motivated cases now? And so in this situation, if we speak about, or if we choose between economical situation and to save lives, of course, first of all, we have to save people. We can save people only if Lukashenko will go out, if Belarus will be independent, democratic country. Without this, unfortunately, murders, rapes, etc., everything should be continued. This is a problem. So we have to return Belarus to democratic rails, by my opinion. And thank you for your solidarity and your attention.
There is also a question on the situation of migrants. We know that there have been trafficked, some migrants and refugees have been trafficked to Minsk in order to put the hybrid pressure on the Baltic countries, on Poland. What is your opinion, Grigory and Olga? Has EU stood the test? Because of course this flow of migrants, these hybrid attacks were intended to break the unity in some cases of EU's position towards Belarus and Russia. So have they stood the test? And Anaïs, is there any possibility that somebody, while observing the situation of migrants, also could report on other things? And is there any humanitarian organization that now has had access, for instance, to the prisons? A question for all of you, because I mean, some cases we see that the Red Cross or Red Crescent has been able to access to gather information. But this would be my question, a little bit different angle because of your different positions, that migrant crisis, and maybe Grigory could begin, and then Anaïs, and then Olga, please. Okay. The migrant crisis.
Yes. First of all, yeah. Yes. First of all, it's, from my point of view, on the first place in this crisis, from my point of view, must be lives of migrants. Lukashenko, everything is clear with Lukashenko. This is about lives. The people are dying there. I don't want Europe to come back to 1939, when Jews were sent everywhere, and nobody wants to accept them. They have a ship from Hamburg to Cuba, to Canada, to United States. Nobody wants to receive them. And they came back and they disappeared in concentration camps. I want to tell you as well that it was a special letter to Stalin from Nazis offering USSR to take 2 million Jews, and Stalin rejected. And then Holocaust, they disappeared. So please, let us not repeat anything like that. Pope Francis was giving the same example 2 or 3 days ago, being in Greece. Yes. So for me, the first point is the lives of migrants. It's a very complicated issue, but the response of Europe on the migrants is number one. What to do with Lukashenko, that he is just making this kind of provocation or war? This is a different question, and it must be with the air trafficking and many other things. I'm not an expert in that. It's also, I'm not in a position to give the advice. I'm not going to teach anybody, but I want to say that the first is a life of migrants. If European Union is thinking about human lives, So it's a question number one, their lives. Yet this is the problem which must be solved. And of course, Lukashenko is going to use it. And of course, Putin is going to support all this terrible story. So it's necessary to have special strategy in order not to give them the opportunity to do that with the all measures, which is possible. But lives of migrants is anyhow number one, not only on the Belarusian border, but as a whole, because we had this terrible, terrible experience of 1939. And secondly, I think it's my last possibility to say something on this seminar. I want to say all efforts, this is the second point, the most important, all efforts should be directed to the release of political prisoners in Belarus. This must be condition number one. Nothing no talks, no ways, no discussions. Release the political prisoners. Give them the right to go back at home. The people are simply dying there. So it's number one. Everybody should speak only about that. And that would work, believe me, that would work. Of course, it is better to think what means sanctions if the exports are growing 58%? What means sanctions? About what kind of sanctions we are asking each other. Belarusian economy is a small economy because the country is not so big. Russia is always ready to cover all the sanctions. And by the way, I was preparing the special report. I would say that exports from Belarus to Russia decreased last year and to European Union increased. This is the substance of the situation. You know, this is all the other is words and emotions, but this is a substance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Grigory. Olga, what would you answer? How would you answer the question?
By my opinion, the situation with migrants is very, very complicated, of course, and Grigory is very right to speak about the lives of people who cannot survive on Belarusian-Polish border. But at the same time, I would like to say that Lukashenko is trying to use migrants as a tool of pressure for European Union. President Navseda spoke that he would like to have some conversation, negotiations with Lukashenko about the migration crisis. And next day, the migrants were on Lithuanian border too. Not many, but some. In this situation, I think that we cannot follow for the Lukashenko conditions, and we cannot start to speak with him under his chantage, because in this situation, the situation should be increased, and the problem should be increased, and more people should be involved in such kind of activities. By my opinion, still European Union has no clear answer for Lukashenko. Grigory is right about the economical sanctions, and fifth package is very weak, by my opinion. And of course, in this situation, Lukashenko is, he knows very well that at any moment he can pressure or he can murder new people, can produce new victims, and he cannot, he will not receive any answer. I understand this is Putin behind him, and I understand that the European Union doesn't want to have any quarrels with Putin. But unfortunately, what we have now between Belarus and Poland and Lithuania, we have new Berlin Wall. When Belarusian people are trying to run through the border, it's more and more complicated to do from the political repressions. But at the same time, Lukashenko is continue to murder people. Lukashenko is continue to do what he wants. I think we need common roadmap, not, by the way, only with European politicians, but with Russian democratic politicians too, like Grigory, because Grigory and others, other liberals, they're very well, they understand the, how to say, culture or mentality of Vladimir Putin very well, and he and other liberals can explain much more what was happens, in the head of Vladimir Putin. And by my opinion, we still need common roadmap. Lukashenko and Putin signed the roadmaps, but we still didn't start to create such kind of roadmap between European liberals, between us as Belarusian Democrats, and between Russian liberals. By my opinion, it should be some kind of documents and clear vision how we can change the situation and how we can be more effective in our struggle for democracy and human rights. Still we lack of such kind of vision.
Yeah, that is a good and very concrete proposal. And now I give the floor to Anaïs. I think we are really running out of our time, but just some, Anaïs, what is your answer to the questions I put, and anything else you would like to say at the end of this short seminar?
Thank you. Well, as Special Rapporteur on Belarus, I'm mostly focusing on the fate of Belarusians, including, as I mentioned earlier, the Belarusian migrants. Of course, the latest events, this crisis at the borders of the EU, which has been looming since the spring, actually, has called our attention. But there is actually a Special Rapporteur on the human rights of migrants who is closely monitoring the situation and who has sent actually allegation letters both to the government of Poland and Belarus, because I quote here a statement he issued on 6th of October. The human rights of all the individuals must be respected, meaning that no matter how these people have traveled and arrived at international borders, all migrants, regardless of status, have the right to seek and enjoy protection. And from what they alleged, the conditions under which they happened to be at the border and were prevented from crossing it, and this because of the refoulement practiced by the Polish border guards, has led to a situation when prompt individual examination of their circumstances was not possible. And this also amounts to a violation of international human rights law. That is why it's important to remind that the right to life and freedom from torture, freedom from refoulement and collective expulsions are non-derogable rights which can never be suspended, not even in a state of emergency, as the one that has been pronounced in the neighboring countries, which feel under attack by what indeed has been qualified as a hybrid attack by Mr. Lukashenko as revenge for the sanctions. This is not for me to judge as Special Rapporteur. I don't even have the right to have an opinion on sanctions, because the UN actually does not support sanctions apart from the ones which are decided by the UN Security Council. So if you allow me as a conclusion, I would say that unfortunately how the international community at the UN level could put an end to all these violations when they are attributable to Mr. Lukashenko's decisions and government, it would request, unfortunately, much worse violations. I'm talking about international terrorism, crimes of genocide, crimes of aggression, for the Security Council of the UN to be able to refer this to the International Criminal Court, and for sanctions to be legal sanctions in the sense the UN understands it, to be adopted. All the rest, in the view of the United Nations, are unilateral coercive measures. we are not there yet, although I wish to remind that there have been cases during the year when there has been serious questions raised about the possible threat to international security and regional peace posed by Mr. Lukashenko's action. I'm thinking in particular about the forced downing of a civilian airplane with Ryanair flight on 23rd of May. The International Civil Aviation Organization has yet to publish its conclusions. We're really waiting for them. It's been postponed several times. Now they're expected in February, and based on that, it will be time to reassess the situation also from another angle, the angle of international peace and security.
Well, thank you all of you three for your readiness to be engaged with such knowledge on the difficult situation. It's impossible to wrap up everything, but your messages have been clear to the, at least to the liberal community and to the legal community. And as rightly said, we have forceful friends in many countries who have been supporting Magnitsky kind of laws. And let me also, for instance, mention, I think it is very, we have paid, the EU has been paying attention to the situation of Uyghurs. As Olga was mentioning, the situation is similar here, and we know that the EU is preparing some kind of legislation that would ban imports from products that have been produced by slavery. But I will repeat some only, but I can repeat only some of your good proposals and standpoints, and it's of course release of the political prisoners at first. This was mentioned by all of you. Secondly, I find it also very important that we need to have work for the access of those rapporteurs that you, Anaïs, mentioned, because that is also one of the preconditions. We also noted the request for a kind of common roadmap, that we must see that this is something we need to work together, and that I will bring forward a member of the Bureau of the Liberal International. Finally, I note that you gave also a forceful message to the EU on the treatment of migrants, and we can note that some of the, let's say, draft legislation now proposed by the EU is going in the other direction. We have also here a situation where people are playing on the fear of migrants, on the fear of populists, which is really to the detriment of people who have been put there in jeopardy, not at all in the way that the Pope asked us to treat with those migrants. And finally, I just note once more what you also, Grigory, said about memorial. And I sometimes do use Google Translate to see what you have written. And as you said, is a new qualitative step in your country to return to Stalinism. And we must neither forget memorial and all those people who have been working to give a correct version of Russian history, and not the glorification we see of Stalinism and all that it entails. I'm ever so grateful for you for having given your time and your expertise. You know that this discussion has been recorded, and I will ensure that my colleagues and our friends will also note your proposals. So thank you very much, very much. It was a hard subject, but with such excellent persons, excellent experts, we had a very good discussion. And excuse me from diverting from my manuscript, but your interventions were so interesting. Thank you, and have a good evening, and let us keep in contact.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you.